These signs mean you're undergoing the darkest awakening. There's a moment on the spiritual path that no one prepares you for. It's not the bliss, it's not the crystals or the mantras or the visions of light. It's the darkness, the void, the absolute collapse of everything you thought you were. If you've clicked on this, it's not by accident. Something inside of you has either already begun to unravel, or you're standing right at the edge. And I'm here to tell you, what you're going through isn't madness. It's awakening, the darkest kind, the kind that doesn't whisper gently but rips the ground from beneath your feet, the kind that doesn't show up with angel wings but arrives like a storm that refuses to pass until you've destroyed the lies you've been living. One of the first signs that you're undergoing the darkest awakening is that nothing makes sense anymore. Suddenly, the life you build, the relationships, the job, the routine, the beliefs, they all feel hollow. You might still go through the motions, but your soul is somewhere else. It's like you've been unplugged from a matrix you didn't even know you were inside. Conversations feel shallow. Your own reflection feels distant. You start to question everything. Why am I really here? Who am I if I'm not performing the role I've always played? This isn't depression. This isn't burnout. This is the soul's refusal to keep pretending. It's the moment the false self starts to decay.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
And when that begins, the second sign appears. Isolation. Not just physical, but emotional and spiritual isolation. People pull away. Or maybe you pull away from them, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. You start to feel like you're existing in a different dimension, even if you're still physically present. It's not that you don't love others anymore, it's that the energy no longer matches. Small talk becomes unbearable, performances feel suffocating. You crave silence not because you're trying to escape, but because your soul is finally loud enough to hear. This isolation isn't a punishment. It's sacred. It's where the real work begins. It's where you meet yourself without the noise. Then comes the disintegration of identity. You no longer recognize who you are. The things that used to excite you now feel meaningless. The things that used to define you, your job, your status, your image, begin to rot in your hands. And it's terrifying because no one gives you a map for this part. You're mourning your own death without dying physically. You're grieving the version of yourself you once protected. And it hurts. But in that grief, a question begins to form. Who am I becoming? The answer isn't immediate. In fact, the longer you search for it, the quieter it hides. Because this stage isn't about finding answers. It's about unlearning everything that was never truly yours. And then, if you're still walking, still breathing, still willing to feel, it gets darker. The pain intensifies, not because something is wrong, but because something is waking up. Every buried emotion, every unhealed wound, every lie you swallowed for safety begins to surface. You cry for no reason, you rage without warning, you collapse in the middle of the day because your nervous system can no longer hold the weight of the facade. This is the purge. This is the sacred fire. And if you're in it, I need you to hear me. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are shedding. You are burning away everything that isn't aligned with your truth. And yes, it feels like dying. But what if it's not death? What if it's rebirth? Let me ask you something deeply honest. When was the last time you sat with yourself in silence and truly listened? Without judgment, without distraction. Most people never do. But during the darkest awakening, you're forced to. There's nowhere else to run, and in that stillness, you begin to hear the whispers. The ancient voice that's always been inside you, the one that says, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning of the real you." And slowly, the dark becomes a teacher. Slowly, the pain becomes a portal. Slowly, you realize, I'm not falling apart. I'm falling into myself. But here's what no one tells you. Transformation is ugly. It's not poetic. It's messy, chaotic, and deeply uncomfortable. You'll lose friends. You'll disappoint people. You'll question your sanity. But if you keep going, if you keep choosing truth over comfort, alignment over approval, presence over performance, you will emerge, not as a polished, perfect being, but as someone who is finally real. And that is the most powerful thing a human can become. The darkest awakening is not about fixing yourself. It's about remembering that nothing was ever broken. It's about descending into the underworld of your psyche and reclaiming the parts of you that you abandoned to survive. It's about facing your shadow, not with fear, but with reverence. Because your shadow isn't your enemy, it's your gatekeeper. It's the part of you that holds your suppressed power. And until you face it, you'll never be free. You don't need to escape this darkness. You need to enter it fully, the way a seed enters the soil, the way night enters the sky, because only in the dark can you remember your own light. Not the false light of spiritual bypassing, not the performative light of pretending everything's okay, but the real light, the one that's forged in silence, in tears, in surrender. So, if everything is falling apart, if you feel lost, if you feel like screaming or disappearing or giving up, don't. You are not dying. You are being reborn. And yes, it's painful. Yes, it's lonely. But it's sacred. This is the path of the initiated. This is the territory of the soul. And if you're walking through it, it means you are ready, even if you don't feel like it. The ego's funeral. Why your old self must die before your soul can lead. There's a moment in the darkest awakening where everything begins to crack, not just outside of you, but within. You start to feel yourself unravel. The mask you've worn so well begins to slip. The identity you worked so hard to build suddenly feels like a costume, one you can't bear to wear a second longer. And here's the truth that most people will never tell you, because even many spiritual teachers avoid it. If you truly want to awaken, your ego must die. Not partially, not politely, but completely. And that death will feel like madness. It will feel like loss. It will feel like your entire world is falling into a void. Because it is. The ego's funeral is not a metaphor. It's a spiritual reality. You don't truly awaken until you've buried the version of yourself that was never truly you. The ego isn't evil. It's just scared. It was built to protect you, to organize your identity around safety, validation, and control. But the ego's job is survival, not expansion, and when your soul begins to rise, the ego starts to panic. It's like handing over the keys of your life to a guide you can't see, touch, or explain. The ego screams, "No! What about our plans, our goals, our image?" And the soul whispers, "That wasn't real. That was projection." And the war begins. It's not loud, it's internal, but it's relentless. You'll feel torn between the person you've always been and the one you're becoming. One is familiar, the other is terrifyingly unknown, and yet, you know deep down, if you keep choosing the old self, you'll never taste freedom. You'll never truly live. This ego death shows up in strange ways. You may start to feel like a ghost in your own life. You may lose interest in things that once thrilled you. You may feel deep waves of grief even though nothing bad has happened. That grief isn't irrational, it's sacred. You're mourning the death of your false self, the version of you that was molded by trauma, shaped by expectation, and kept alive by performance. That version is dissolving, and in its place, something ancient is awakening, something real, something powerful, but it can't emerge until the ego steps aside. And the ego doesn't go quietly. It fights, it bargains, it clings. That's why this part of the awakening is so intense. You're not just shedding beliefs, you're shedding identities. Have you ever had a moment where you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize yourself, not because of how you looked, but because of how you felt? Like the person staring back at you was a stranger wearing your face? That's the ego's funeral. That's the moment your soul starts to eclipse your old self. And it's terrifying, but it's also the most beautiful thing you'll ever experience, because when the ego dies, what's left is truth. Raw, unfiltered, unshakable truth. You stop chasing things. You stop defending illusions. You stop trying to be understood by people who were never meant to understand you. And for the first time, you breathe, not for survival, but for remembrance. And that remembrance begins to guide everything. You start to feel pulled by something deeper than logic. You begin to move in ways that make no sense to your old self. You make decisions based on alignment, not approval. You follow your inner compass, even when it leads you away from comfort. And suddenly, life isn't about achieving anymore. It's about embodying. It's about being. And that's what the ego could never understand. It always believed your worth was tied to doing, proving, building. But the soul knows you are already whole. You were never meant to become, you were meant to remember. So I ask you, sincerely, what version of yourself are you still keeping alive out of fear? What identity are you clinging to because the unknown feels too risky? Because here's the paradox. The longer you resist the death of the ego, the longer you delay the birth of your freedom. But once you surrender, once you allow the old self to die, you don't just awaken, you arrive. You arrive in your body, in your truth, in your power, and nothing can take that from you. The ego's funeral isn't the end. It's the sacred threshold. It's the moment the soul takes the throne. And when that happens, your life doesn't get easier, it gets truer. You don't escape pain, but you stop being defined by it. You don't avoid challenges, but you stop fearing them. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. That's the power of ego death. It doesn't make you superhuman, it makes you real. It brings you home, the void between worlds. Learning to navigate the in-between after awakening begins. There's a strange and silent space no one talks about on the spiritual path. It comes after the ego has crumbled, after your old life has lost its meaning, but before anything new has truly taken root. It's not the fire anymore, the flames have died down, but neither is it the light, it's the void, the in-between, the space where you are no longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. And this space is disorienting. It's like floating in darkness where everything is still and the silence is so loud it echoes through your bones. If you're here, you know exactly what I mean. You wake up each day with no clear direction. You don't know what to do, but you're no longer willing to go back to what was. You're suspended, and it feels like drowning in stillness. This is when many people give up, not during the breakdown, but during the waiting, during the uncertainty. Because we've been conditioned to believe that movement equals progress, that clarity equals worthiness, that action equals value. And so, when none of those things are present, we panic. The mind begins to scream. You're stuck. You're lost. You're failing. But the soul whispers something else entirely. Be still. This is sacred. This is the womb. And that's what the void really is. It's not a punishment. It's not purgatory. It's the sacred womb of your rebirth. It's the space where the soul rearranges you from the inside out, where the seeds of your true calling begin to sprout underground, invisible to the eye, but alive in the dark. In the void, your job is not to build, it's to be, to listen, to rest, to allow. This is the part of the path where you relearn trust. Not the kind of trust that's based on outcomes, but the kind that's rooted in surrender. Can you trust the process when you don't understand it? Can you trust the timing when it makes no sense? Can you trust the silence when it feels like abandonment? These are not easy questions, but they are the ones that shape the new world you are stepping into. Because if you can hold your center in the void, you can hold it anywhere. It's also in this space that subtle guidance begins to arrive, not in the form of fireworks or visions, but in small, quiet nudges, a thought that feels different, a dream that lingers, a sudden inspiration that pulls you gently in a direction you weren't expecting. The mind will try to override it. It will demand a 5-year plan. It will beg for certainty. But the soul moves like water. It doesn't rush, it flows. And in the void, you begin to learn that flow is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's how nature moves. It's how galaxies expand. It's how you too are meant to move, not in force, but in frequency. So what do you do when you're in the void? You feel. You breathe, you write, you cry if you need to, you walk in nature, you sit in silence, you stop trying to figure it all out, because the void is not the place for answers, it's the place for alignment. It's where you begin to vibrate at the frequency of your future before it arrives. And that's where the magic lives, in the invisible. In the patience, in the faith that something is working through you even when you can't see it. And let's be honest, this space can be profoundly lonely because no one can walk through it for you. People on the outside might think you're wasting time, that you've lost your ambition, that you're just sitting around, but you know better. You know something sacred is unfolding beneath the surface. And the more you honor this space, the more powerful its gifts become. Because when the new life finally begins to emerge, it won't come from force. It will come from flow, from listening, from alignment. And it will feel inevitable, not effortful. So here's the question. Can you be patient with yourself in the space between stories? Can you allow yourself to be rewritten without rushing the next chapter? Because every great awakening has this moment, a pause, a breath, a sacred stillness before the new form takes shape. And if you can stay with it, if you can trust it, you'll discover something no one told you. The void is not empty, it's full of everything you're becoming. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are not lost. You are in the most powerful part of your awakening, the part where your soul is preparing you for a life you can't yet imagine. So breathe, be still, and let the void work its mysterious, sacred alchemy. The return of power, what awakens in you after you've survived the dark night. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, and often invisible to the outside world, when you realize you've made it through. You don't remember the exact day it happened. There's no dramatic scene, no parade, no spiritual fireworks, but something inside of you feels different, solid, anchored. You're no longer begging for clarity or chasing after meaning. You're not trying to escape the silence. You are the silence. And within that stillness, there's power. Not the kind of power the world promotes, loud, aggressive, boastful, but a deeper, quieter, sovereign kind. The power of someone who has walked through hell and remembered they were the light all along. After the darkest awakening, you don't return to who you were. You couldn't if you tried. That version of you no longer exists, and even if they did, you wouldn't want them back, because they were built on survival. They were a beautiful illusion, but an illusion nonetheless. What returns in their place is someone more true, someone more whole, someone who no longer needs to prove or perform or pretend, someone who understands that power isn't about control, it's about presence. It's about knowing who you are in a world that constantly tries to make you forget. You begin to notice that things don't trigger you the way they used to. You don't need to defend yourself in every conversation. You don't feel the urge to explain your choices to people who don't resonate with your path. You're not seeking permission. You're not waiting for a sign. You are the sign. You've become your own validation, your own compass, your own sanctuary. And this doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you unshakable, because you've tasted the void. You've danced with the shadow. You faced the death of your ego and walked through the fire of your own undoing. And now you carry something no one can give you and no one can take away. Embodied truth. And here's the most beautiful part. Once you've reclaimed that truth, your presence begins to ripple outward. Not because you're trying to change anyone, but because your energy speaks louder than words. People start to feel something different around you. Some will be drawn closer, others will fall away. That's part of the purification. You don't chase, you attract. You don't convince, you embody. And as you remain rooted in your center, your life begins to reassemble, but this time from the inside out, not based on who you think you should be, but on who you actually are. You start to notice synchronicities lining up with eerie precision. The right people appear, the right opportunities emerge. The path reveals itself, one divine breadcrumb at a time. You realize that what once felt like chaos was actually choreography, that every delay was protection, that every heartbreak broke open a space for something truer to arrive, and you stop trying to make sense of it all because you finally understand this isn't about logic. This is about alignment. This is about living from a deeper intelligence, the intelligence of your soul. And with that return of power comes a new kind of responsibility. You no longer live on autopilot. You no longer numb your intuition. You no longer run from your inner voice. Instead, you build a life that honors it. You make decisions that are rooted in resonance, not fear. You create boundaries not out of anger, but out of reverence for your energy. You speak not to impress, but to express what's real, because you're no longer here to play roles. You're here to live truth, fully, fiercely, free. So I ask you, one final time, are you willing to live as the version of yourself that your pain was preparing you for? Are you ready to stop rehearsing your power and start living it? Because the darkness was never meant to break you. It was meant to awaken you. And now you carry the medicine that only the wounded can offer. You carry the wisdom that only the silence could teach. You carry the light that only the dark could reveal. This is what it means to survive the darkest awakening. Not that you return to the world as who you were, but that you return as who you were always meant to be. Grounded, clear, whole, and more alive than ever. You are not behind, you are not late, you are right on time, and the world needs what you've become. Welcome back, welcome home.